Good day and welcome to the third in our AI Search series of interviews with our Business Advisory Board members. Today's topic will be the application and impacts of AI on the legal profession. I'm excited to say we're joined by an expert in the field, Matt Gimowski, a distinguished attorney whose practice is alternative assets valuation advisory at Kroll, providing legal counsel for the development of novel digital products and complex financial services engagements. His experience spans governance and risk at Kroll, contract and supply chain with Raytheon, and with active duty experience in the U.S. Army Judge Advocate General's Corps, Matt has emerged as a thought leader at the intersection of law and technology. An alumnus of Harvard Kennedy School with a focus on cybersecurity, Matt earned a law degree from the University of Maryland Francis King Carey School of Law and a BA in political science from the University of Rochester. In a time where artificial intelligence is reshaping industries, many in the legal profession are grappling with perhaps its greatest transformation in decades: how to incorporate powerful AI tools without sacrificing the core human values of the practice: judgment, ethics, and client trust. Leading the interview will be our friend Rob Nail, futurist, serial entrepreneur, associate founder, and former CEO of Singularity University. Rob now works as a strategic advisor and mentor. He's working with the Nomura SRI Innovation Center and heads AI and innovation at WHOX. His background is deeply technical, mechanical, material science, manufacturing systems engineering from UC Davis and Stanford. But what stands out is his focus on exponential thinking, how we lead organizations not just to adapt to change, but to shape it. Over to you, Rob.
Gordon, thank you very much for the introductions. And Matt, it's great to be here with you. Very excited to dive into the future of AI in the legal profession. Obviously, AI is hitting every industry, not fully disrupting yet, but we can already see signs of the impact and lots of fun conversations about what's still to come. So would love to hear a little bit, maybe you can just start with a little bit on your background. If you could just share, what's your work look like today, and how did you form your worldview?
It's a great question. Thank you, Robin. First of all, Gordon, thank you for the invitation. Rob, thank you for being the MC. I will do my best to keep this insightful and entertaining within the bounds, right? Because I didn't have this scripted by a chatbot just yet. So a little bit about me. I am a second career technology lawyer. I grew up as an in-courtroom litigator, and that trying cases really informs a lot of my perspective on AI risk, because it's shown me firsthand how words on pages, whether they got there with a human pen or through the output of an agent, have real world ramifications. So I am going to do my best to try to sound not conservative on the tech, because I'm truly not. But forefront to my mind is really what happens when an agent either stays on script and binds you in a way you didn't expect, or goes off the boil and or hallucinates, etc. So that's sort of my perspective. Now there's a 15-month banging at my office door. No AI protection for that. But the second part of your question was, what does my practice look like vis-a-vis AI now? So I, like you'll hear throughout the call, when I will represent, for lawyers and law firms, how the view from the trenches there, I definitely use it. I use it for limited use cases that I have done at least some vetting on personally. So my organization has enterprise licenses for Copilot and ChatGPT. Do I use them? Absolutely. I use them now more as a research precursor. So if I'm trying to get smart on something new, throw a question into the chatbot, get the lay of the land. But that's pretty much my limit now. And I will validate that, and I will go to more classic resources to confirm. But I will say it's an unbelievable advantage in terms of just getting initial quick impressions on where the left and right limits of a new issue might be. So that's mainly where I use it now. But if I was to go back into a courtroom, I might use it a little bit differently. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of those use cases later on.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into more use cases. I'm curious, how do you stay informed? How did you learn about AI? Are you doing anything specifically to stay up to speed? What's your education look like around AI?
So professional lawyers specifically, and I'm sure other professionals have professional responsibility obligations to stay current on tech. And for lawyers, that means, everything from the transition in the 80s from, pen and paper letters to where we find ourselves today. So there is in the background a looming professional responsibility obligation. That said, one of the reasons why I was interested in working with AI certs in this capacity is it's one of my key strategies to stay current on this, because I get to work with such talented people, to hear different perspectives on what other people in different industries are doing in AI. So that's literally one of the ways that I stay up to date on it. My organization also has an AI committee that I am at least adjacent to, if occasionally part of. Like, I sort of bop back and forth, but as inlaid to tech procurement and modernization as I am in my practice, validating tools with InfoSec and so on, we're always looking at various AI functionalities. So I see it mostly in my day-to-day procurement hat. But even Gordon is kind enough to circulate interesting articles, and in one's network is a good way to keep up with it too. And I find myself relying on posts people I follow. You, Rob, are always at the forefront of interesting things. So it's a personal thing and then a professional thing is how to stay up to date on it.
Has there been any movement around like foundational courses set as a standard in the legal industry?
You mean for like education?
Yeah, right. So like
There are some. So like I know various providers of micro credentials, like the IAP,
right
Privacy Professionals Association. They have an AI use case
module. Yep.
micro
Yep.
credential module, right? So, and I'm sure there are others that do it. Vendors, as you know, have their own in-house education platforms, mostly aligned to buttressing their commercial offerings, and no harm or shame in that. But you used to be able to go to a VMware and take like their courses on these things. So I'm sure the industry is provided for them. I'm mostly tracking like the IAPP cert and like similar level industry, non-binding obviously, but industry standards for CLEs and stuff like that. So yeah, it's out there. And it's certainly going to be a cornerstone for, I think, how this tech matures across the market. Is people are going to start getting micro credentialed in it, and then there's going to be a flourish of people with basic like core competencies, and theoretically more adoption based on the market's comfort with what AI tech can do.
Right. And I think this is probably how we both found AI certs, where the technology is moving very quickly and it's pretty hard to find institutions that are keeping up. So AI certs is definitely kind of at the forefront of launching stuff, which is fun to watch. But
Absolutely.
maybe we can talk about what the legal practice is actually using. How is the legal practice actually using AI today?
Yeah.
And what does that look like? What are the functions that are
So
most
it's a
visible?
really, really good question. And the answer is everybody's using it in some capacity. There's a little bit of FOMO there that is driving adoption. But at every echelon of legal practice, from small shops all the way up to big, ultra expensive international law firms, they're all using it some way. No question in my mind about it. It depends on where you plug into the hierarchy. So small firms are using it to help, like we all are, automate repetitive tasks that don't involve high human touch or judgment. And that's more on the like enterprise support side is my guess and my feel, what I've seen.
And
So
like research,
it's
you
not as
mentioned using
much.
it for, yeah, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I think I think we're on the same. They don't use it as much for legal support as they do business support. But as you go up the chain, firms are using it for research. They're using it for brief writing, and most of the products are aligned to workflow automation, to making sure individual members of a deal team have their documents and they have their tasks. So it's almost like a CLM at this point. But then, as Gordon circulated earlier, there's just recently was announced, this AI native law firm. And that's a really interesting example because, and I agree with the premise. What they're doing is they're building from the ground up. They're not trying to layer into their stack AI capabilities. That I think is a very difficult way to do it because it's not a very good match for the existing old school practice of law. If this is going to work, it's going to work from an entirely new design. So this firm, for example, they have basically a suite of AI tools all aligned to do forward progress, forward momentum, keeping people in the loop in a way that supports them. And that is aligned with how I think of the tech now, because as you and I discussed previously, the main risk in professional use of AI is the bifurcation of human judgment and professional responsibility from the ease of what AI outputs can be. So ultimately, as a lawyer, when I sign something and I submit that to the court, no matter if it's 99% my own individual brilliance or Gordon's, and it's got a little bit of an AI assist in there, like, you have represented as an officer of the court, that is your original work, that it belongs to you. So there's no way to avoid that responsibility, and nor should you as a professional, with the use of AI. So that's like the far end. Where we're going is the maturation of how your obligations as a professional dovetail with the actual work product serving real clients. Because my guess here is that if you retained me to represent you, and I gave you something that was 100% AI output, and I signed my name to it, and we lost at trial or whatever, the outcome wasn't what we wanted, you wouldn't be super stoked about that, because you're hiring, at the end of the day, a person to serve you in a professional capacity. That's a long-winded way of saying, to recap, AI is everywhere in the pantheon of lawyering. It's just a question of how and when. And I think I said this before too, is even firms who are not outwardly doing it are crafting affiliated labs where those labs are tasked with innovation, automation, figuring out how to. It's almost like the old relationship between Bell Labs and the I know I'm going to forget the name, but they got their pieces, they've got their equipment from Westinghouse or whatever it was. It was a captive engineering firm, but Bell Labs was
AT&T.
on the. Yeah, that's right, Gordon. So they had their own separate engineering supply and supply chain with the guys doing the big brain work. And that's almost how big law firms are doing this, where their associates are practicing in their normal capacity, but they're getting the benefit of these labs that supply them with native AI innovation, from templates to, increased capabilities for research and so on. And that's how bigger firms are maintaining their reputation for, venerable, respected, stalwart legal advice, while also making sure they don't miss out on the next innovation wave.
That's great. And you mentioned there's a bit of FOMO out there. And I think every company and every industry has a little bit of that. The other side of it too that I'm seeing a lot, which is maybe less is not as productive, is this pressure from either management or clients for you to be using it for efficiency gains or replacing people. How do you see that do you see that as a misconception? Do you see that kind of pressure also in the industry? How do you think about those?
For sure. And this is something that is industry wide. So if we put our management hats on, we're looking at balance sheets, we're looking at, hey, Gordon costs X, Rob costs Y, Matt costs Z, right? And it's easy to demonstrate that making those people redundant saves a certain quantum of dollars. But the non incremental retained risk by making, let's say, just the three of us, because this is who I'm looking at on my screen, the three of us redundant, is much harder to quantify, and such an interesting piece of risk management, we'll say. Because if Gordon, you and me left our respective organizations, without giving us too much credit, there'd be a huge loss of knowledge, a huge loss of institutional familiarity. And then theoretically, in order for this play to work, you're relying on that probably agentic AI agent to do the things we do with sort of the ability we do them. And to the extent that's not a one-to-one match, organizations are retaining a significant amount of risk, client-facing, reputational, even product delivery. So, capitalism is not going away. Efficiencies in organizations are here to stay, and I support that. However, it is much more nuanced than saying replace 10 people with this AI tool, because first of all, somebody needs to maintain it and support it, and you need an engineering support for that tool. And beyond that, if the tool is interacting with your organization's clients and customers, there needs to be a human face at some point in that supply chain for the clients to be happy. And if you're risking that, then you do so at a cost, which I'm sure the market will ascertain at some point. It's just now it's not, that those figures aren't there. And I am an advocate of treading carefully on redundancy first. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think that I think we've been saying the same thing since we had early automation starting, right? It's like, hey, let's just automate the whole factory, and actually, it's much more complex and nuanced than that.
Yeah, it doesn't always work out that way in practice, right?
Yeah. But over time, we can see how it may, have some efficiency gains there, but for the foreseeable
no
future,
doubt it absolutely will.
Yeah.
It's just, it's an institutional culture thing as much as anything, because if your manager says, my mandate from our ownership is to accomplish this amount of efficiency, and this is in making people redundant and replacing them with automation is one facet of that, there's very little the average you and I in the trenches can do about that. However, if I was to be part of that advisory process, I would say, let's be careful about rapid redundancy, because it leaves a very real hole in client service, no matter how non-hallucinatory that AI agent may be, right?
All right, so beyond the this complexity around quantifying risk and just being able to adopt this new technology, what other limitations do you see specifically in legal practice around adopting AI?
Yeah, that's also a very good question. I mean, look, AI tools in the law and probably in other professions can do a wild amount of stuff. Like, if you really wanted to, you could go from signing an engagement letter with a client probably to jury trial based on material input from an AI suite. But I actually just saw a really interesting little snippet from the leader, or the president of, who was it? Let me find her. I want to attribute this correctly. Bear with me a second. She is the president of, it's one of the chat apps, Signal. And what she said about the risk is, it's tempting for humans to want to stick their brains sort of on the sidelines in a jar and just let everything go. And that is that's a human tendency, right? Like, we are wired to seek efficiencies and to decrease mental load. No problem with that as a premise. However, as I said to you before, lawyers can't shirk that. And we've all seen headlines of lawyers being like, "Oh, Your Honor, I'm sorry, I can't explain why this case doesn't exist, and why I, as an officer of the court, represented to you that it does, and that it stands for a certain premise in law." Interestingly, the judges who have been admonishing those lawyers have themselves recently been caught using AI for their opinions. So that to me is very symptomatic of where we are, which is everybody's using it. We do need like left and right limits on, hey, in a professional setting, you can use it up until this point, but after that, you've got to pick up your own pen. And I just thought it was very interesting that the judges are doing it too, which just goes to show there's like a very to be determined policing relationship in the profession, because the judges are supposed to, they enforce, they're like umpires, right? They call balls and strikes. They are supposed to be the ones validating the rules and upholding the rule of law vis-a-vis the inputs given to them from counsel. And to the extent that they are using cases that don't exist by virtue of their own AI research, it's an infinite regress very quickly. Like, it's just a loop. So look, that's the biggest risk in my mind, is that the innate human tendency towards outsourcing critical thought. Get it? It's efficiency. It saves brain power. And we're all burning glucose at a hugely high rate, but you can't do it. You got to stay plugged in order to do your own job for your clients. And also it makes better lawyering. As much as we all might want to outsource our brain waves, I won't do that to you, Gordon, I promise.
Well, I think you're pointing to one of the areas of real potential innovation, specifically in the AI safety arena. There's lots of startups looking at sort of evaluation capabilities. How to evaluate the output to make sure that it is real output, right? And so that feels like a guardrail tool that we should have for legal and everywhere else, so that you can
Definitely.
keep working up to that limit that you said, and this tool will help you know where that limit really is.
Yeah, Robert,
And
the checksum is a hugely important thing in code as much as it is here, right? So
right,
the checksum function in a piece of code is the most brilliant and simplistic way to ensure that output is right. You're just adding up a couple of digits at the end of a line, but what it does is it gets you exactly, Rob, what you said. So to the extent there are providers looking to do that for this, could not support it more strongly, because that's what's needed.
right. And what we're trying to address is this lack of trust and potential accountability, right?
For sure.
That's the thing that in highly regulated, high risk areas, obviously we have to have that before um, the tool, the technology can really scale throughout, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and
We
I was just
Yeah, go
going
ahead.
to say that reminds me of the point of our discussion prior, when we were talking about, how AI might affect your practice. And if we're going to ask that question in a bit, I don't know, but at this point in the conversation, it's relevant to say, at what point does a lawyer's practice go from doing the work to themselves being the monitor of the AI outputs? And that's a place where it could very well be in the medium term. But the point remains that in that process, someone who is a licensed attorney will need to validate the things the AI is doing. So they'll have to check the sites, they'll have to scrub the writing. And I guess in that sense, you get pushed up to the question of, if I'm QCing the AI output, I might as well do it myself as the lawyer. So you're just one echelon above, one standard deviation away from what you had been doing. You're just doing it on output created by an AI agent. And I'm not saying that's bad, but that's where I think this will go, in the sense that in professions in high risk areas, like you say, a human person has to be responsible for the output. And if they are responsible, then it'd probably be best practice for them to really get into it and parse it.
We last time we talked about some other current limitations and challenges that we're facing. One was around regional differences, right? The legal profession has to navigate potentially different kinds of case laws depending on what state, country, wherever
Mhm.
you're at, right? Is that a fundamental hurdle, or is that actually an opportunity where AI is maybe even better and empowering?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge. I mean, that's basically the question of federalism in the law. Is sometimes we have federal laws that apply to each of the states. Sometimes we have 50 different state laws. Commercial and consumer privacy is the most, well, it used to be the most salient example before AI regulation took its place, right? And in the absence of a federal preemptive law, you have 50, well, eventually you will have 50 different standards. They're all different pieces of the same pie, but certain states prioritize one aspect and downplay another, etc. So is that a use case where AI could come in and do what would take me as a lawyer a week to coalesce and aggregate and analyze? Absolutely. And I've even played around with some of that functionality. And I'm not going to pick on ChatGPT. It's just the one that I've done this for. So I've asked it to compare state privacy laws and contrast them and pick out certain differences. And it does it. It doesn't do it as well, at least when I did this test. It didn't do it as well as I'd wanted it to. But I can tell you for sure that it would have taken me a solid uninterrupted day to do the thing it did in a minute. Identify, like, from the very basics, identify where the statute in the code is. Like, that's not straightforward because each code is not the same. So you got to find it. You got to get into the provisions, and you got to figure out where each one addresses the thing you're talking about. So in that sense, yeah, totally a great use case for AI for sure. 100%.
Awesome. Let's see. Oh, let's talk a little bit about risk management, because it seems like that's what the legal profession is all about, is helping us sort of
Indeed.
manage and understand risk better. Is AI introducing new risks to the equation?
It's not introducing a lot of new risk. It's introducing risk in new ways. Does that distinction? So the risks aren't new. It's just a different threat vector. So, like, everybody's worried about data leakage with respect to their supply chain and their vendors and their SaaS tools. The incorporation of AI, either training or using, or where that data is even stored, like, that introduces the same spillage, confidentiality, IP risk that we know about. It's just a new way for that risk to get there. I'm sure there are new risks solely germane to AI, but when I think about it, you're looking at, it's like licensed AI and shadow AI are both new risks, because as an enterprise, theoretically, if your enterprise licenses an AI tool and your employees use it in, your organization's enclave, that AI, the data the AI possesses is at least geofenced within your Azure, your AWS, whatever. If your employees are going on their home machine and typing up, Gordon's confidential information into it, and there's no way to claw that back. So that's the same risks as we worried about, just like an entire brand, like Brave New World, about how it is those risks are realized. So in an effort to mitigate them, it's almost the same as all cyber risk, right? People-driven problems, people-driven solutions. So you need training, you need trust with your employees, maybe you need more monitoring. Like, I read recently that some organizations, to ward off the threat of the shadow AI, they'll go in and they'll audit employee corporate cards to, like, check to see if an open AI license is on there. And that's really the most, like, rudimentary example of something that is required to deal with a brand new modern threat that I can think of. Like, in order to head off the threat of shadow AI, people are, like, literally auditing credit card statements. It's the juxtaposition is just so shocking to me. But at the end of the day, the threats are mostly old, but the vector is new.
Okay, I like that. Now, as we're looking forward a little bit, a lot of the talk within a bunch of organizations is around agentic AI, deploying agents that can somewhat autonomously make decisions in, discrete circumstances. And in recent history, we know we've had some interesting news articles around airlines. So Gordon actually mentioned Air Canada AI chatbot launching discounts, not approved discounts, and then people take advantage of it, and then the airline's like, uh-oh, and they're liable because that's that was on their site. And another version of that is, there's a lot of conversation about how AI can allow you to be delivering much more personalized products and services, and to the point where airlines, and I've just seen a lot of articles around Delta launching very personalized pricing, right? So I know Gordon is like super uber rich, and so he's gonna have to pay $10,000 for his ticket, but me, like, I'm gonna get $100 tickets.
Right.
That feels like a
Yeah.
weird Is that like what kind of new space are we navigating here?
Surge pricing across the board makes me so uncomfortable. I can't put my finger on why. I mean, I guess I can. Like, as an organization, like I get why one or might want to do that in theory, but it just in practice, it just seems like such a easy way to alienate your customer base. And this is my personal opinion. I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody here, but I would not do business with an organization that charges Gordon 10,000 and Rob 100. Like it makes no sense to me. I'm not an economist. I don't have an MBA. I'm sure somebody decided it was a good idea, but like I'm not for it. I'm not for that.
It
But
feels
the
icky,
first
right? It
example,
does feel icky. Yeah.
yeah, it's for sure. And it goes to even more fundamental problems, which is like, how do you assess what each person should pay? And like, it feels it just feels God, I hate to call it un-American because that's not entirely what I mean, but like it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel democratic. It feels like a corporate grab. And again, solely in my personal capacity, am I making that statement? But to your first point about the output of the agent becoming a binding contract, that's a real legal risk. But again, like our last answer, it's not a new thing. I mean, it's just a new way to express something like there was a Prime deal a few years ago where there was a pricing error in the website, and I'm sure that wasn't an AI agent setting the price, manual error, and Amazon had to honor the like decimal point difference in pricing. And it almost reminds me of, remember that Toyota promotion where they promised somebody a toy Yoda, but it was like Toyota. It's almost like that, where if you get cute with stuff, you have to be you have to know that there is some comeuppance happening. So it's all the same threat. Misleading someone in a newspaper ad, the decimal plate's different on AWS or on Prime, and the output of a chatbot. They're just it's just a modern incantation of what you say to your clients in public. And once they rely on that information, it's called detrimental reliance. It's not exactly on point legal concept here, but the point is, if I make a representation to you, Rob, through a chatbot as an organization, and you take that and you run with it and you make a business decision or transaction on account of what has been represented to you, that's it. The organization is bound. So there's a risk there, and that risk will minimize as models mature and become more sophisticated, but that doesn't mean they're not going to be subject to prompt injection or some other attack that causes a wonky output. And in that case, there will definitely be some people, some class of innocents who benefit from the manipulated output, and you got to do something with them, and there will be a threat actor there. So like, again, cyber threats here are real, and it if it's connected to the internet or facing a client, you've got to have a plan to how to deal with it from a risk perspective.
Yeah, I like that. And I agree with you that, that risk likely will reduce with maturity with these tools. However, this is the area that I think we're going to see the most growth around because all organizations are really trying to think about personalized products and services, right? And so we're going to get this explosion of new kinds of personalized contracts and offerings that might really, here's a whole new potential, here's a prediction, there may be some substantial growth and opportunity for sort of boutique legal services in this slight, small domain, maybe
Yeah.
something like that.
No, and personalization and tailoring has been fed by data consumption for what, the last 15 years, and like slowly
Yep.
but surely legal and consumer protections are catching up. Then there's a pivot, then there's a line in a privacy policy somewhere that gives people the authority to do stuff with data. Like, that is the way the wind's blowing, no question. I personally, again, I might be dating myself, and this sounds like I'm a gentleman of a certain age, but when I need a product, I don't necessarily need it delivered to me by tailored ad to discover my need
Yeah.
for that thing. However,
Yep.
there have been certain instances where I've needed something, and I get served an ad by a vendor that I didn't know existed for a competing product, and it's made my experience better. It's just as much a client relation public-facing risk as a technology one. So if your clients want that and they're receptive to the experience, go for it. The risk for an organization is, what if Rob doesn't want ads for braided brown leather belts served to him directly because his wife or brother was in a Macy's shopping for belts? Like, there's an ick there. And it's just a question of making sure the market and the MBAs are seeing eye to eye. Historically, they don't, but also historically, when new things come out, people are, some people are cautious about adopting them. Some people adopt them right away. I myself, again, without sounding too conservative, don't always love a personalized ad. But again, I can admit that a couple of times I've gotten them and I've ended up buying the product. So it does work. It's just a question of how you do it.
Yeah, I think another current example in this same vein is Reddit suing Perplexity. I think it's Perplexity, right? Because
Yes.
Perplexity is scraping Reddit's proprietary data sources, and if an AI if a company is getting this proprietary data and using it to personalize for me, like, man, how does that get tracked, and how does the liability get?
So I was having this conversation at an IAPP panel last night with a guy who works for a data broker, and we got really in the weeds about public data and where are the limits on what you can do with it from a scraping perspective. On one hand, if Rob or me or Gordon, if we upload something to the internet, we lose what you would call in criminal procedure a reasonable expectation of privacy in it. Like, it's gone. We all know that. And if you say otherwise, it's not really credible, right? Like, it's out there. Who has rights in it has been the subject of a lot of scholarly debate. When we were trying to do privacy laws, people were talking about individual data licenses. Like, I license Rob to use my data for his Reddit thread or whatever. I don't know if that's taken off per se, but like, what's scraped is, I don't know, can you use it for any purpose? Can you use it for your commercial product? What if I upload something to LinkedIn and it gets scraped from them? I don't know what their terms say, but their terms must lay claim to that data. They probably think it's theirs. So if you scrape it from them, even though they got it for free, where do the limits lie? I don't know. These are both academic and not academic questions.
I love this.
But ultimately,
yeah.
No, it's just once it's
No.
out there, it's out there, and people are going to scrape it. And
yeah, and you just highlighted a really big potential risk bucket in my personal life, which is all of those terms and T&Cs that I just click and accept, click and accept. It pops up. It's got 20 pages. I'm like, okay, click accept. Did I just give away all of my GPS data and my purchasing data, and now it can all be scraped?
You absolutely might have, right?
Right.
So we live in a disclosure and permission-based society, which means that organizations, governments, processing purposes, like, you all have to give permission for that somewhere. But ultimately, if the choice is use LinkedIn and click their terms and allow them to use your MAC address while you're in, Denny's, you might have signed away that right in your T's and C's. Nobody reads them, but your choice is one of adhesion. It's consume the product or give or not. And if not, then go back to the Stone Age. And I'd like to think we can do better than that. I just don't know how. So what's your bargaining power vis-a-vis a EULA or terms and conditions for any of these platforms? Very little. There was a picture going around for like some golf tournament, it was Masters or something, but it was like, solely by virtue, as a sign, solely by virtue of your presence at the 18th green or by entering the course, like, you agree to let them use your likeness, you give them a license for all purposes, uncompensated, irrevocable, yada, yada. But like, is that a good match for how people do things? Like, just by virtue of existing in a place that you bought a ticket to, you have to waive your right to rights in your data, your personal likeness. So I don't know about that. I mean, let's call it the Masters. The proprietors of the Masters want to use your picture. They want to snap pictures of the 18th green. It's a good thing for them to get the rights to do that, so I support that. Is it part of the license on the back of your ticket? Is it a standalone sign that says, merely by virtue of gracing us with your presence, you waive all right to do anything, you can't sue us, etc.? I don't know, but that's where we are right now. So, look, T's and C's ultimately will matter. People have a nonchalance about clicking through them, but if you don't like something that happens with your data, you're going to have to go to arbitration to enforce those rights, because I'm sure an arbitration provision is part of it. And for normal schmoes like me and you, like, we can't spend $10,000 fighting an arbitration clause. Gordon might with his $10,000, Southwest ticket or whatever. But the point is, there's not a lot of power at the individual contributor, for lack of a better term, right? You're contributing your data level. And I don't know how that changes, other than, how would you change it, Rob? Does everybody not use a platform? Do you take your business to a different platform? Like, what data does Reddit even consider proprietary to them? Like, these are just blog threads that people use. Like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, Matt, let's invent a new company right now. I think we
Okay.
could build a little AI assistant that runs alongside and it evaluates all the risk buckets, the profile of risk that I'm taking on with every click of a terms and conditions. And and maybe I could establish levels of where I want that, what kinds of things in my life I
Good
don't
idea,
want.
Rob.
Yeah.
Technologist,
And
this guy.
it feels like that is kind of needed because I don't know how exposed I am at the
Yeah.
moment. Like, and nobody
Yeah. Look,
does, right? And that, yeah.
no, by way of analogy, there are companies that exist that unsubscribe you from lists and from all of your little microservices that you forget you pay $15 a month for. So there's a clearinghouse for taking you off those things. It's a service, right? So I actually think that's a brilliant idea, and I'm not just doing that because I'm trying to curry favor with you. If we
I'm
if
sure
we are design
ChatGPT would say it was brilliant too. I'm sure. I'm sure
Yeah,
Chat
no,
would
no,
tell me it's
that's,
the
I'm embracing
best
my
idea
chat
of ever.
GPT. But
Yeah.
if we are, as a society, the tipping point we've struck is that consumers need to be armed with information so they can make choices, right? Then maybe a co-pilot, for lack of a better term, that does parse and aggregate like a risk score for how much you've committed to your likeness and so on is a great idea, because that way sort of vis-a-vis each term and condition you accept, and then in the aggregate where you are, like, you could benchmark it, I guess. Rob's digital risk is slightly more than mine because he's accepted terms over here that I haven't. It's a great idea, and maybe a really important piece of consumer protection in the future, frankly.
Yeah, maybe. Awesome. Well, thank you for the validation. So let's talk about what does the industry look like going forward? Do you think are there new roles? Are there new specializations that emerge over time? How do you think about
Oh,
that?
100%. Um, and that dovetails with how AI is going to affect education. So I've not been shy in sharing my belief that micro credentialing is going to be a hugely important disruptor to traditional education. I'm not saying 4-year very expensive schools are dead, or wherever in the EU how they do it, whatever. I don't know about that, but that model is definitely ripe for disruption, to use jargon. So with these micro credentials, Rob, there's absolutely going to be a rise of staffing positions in firms that handle these things on like a SME basis. Like, lawyers are going to lawyer, but it's sort of like a paralegal, but one trained in the exploitation of AI tools, solely aligned to my practice as an energy lawyer or whatever. Absolutely going to happen. There's a way to reduce cost. You reduce lawyer overhead, you make the lawyers you have more efficient, and then you have somebody whose full-time job is to be thinking about AI. So I, as a lawyer, can evaluate and use their input, but I share some of that cognitive burden on the intricacies of manipulating the tools, because there's a lot of them out there and I'm sure they're all great, but I haven't had a demo of every tool. I don't know what each thing does. Like, this AI native law firm, Gordon, that you've been circulating, they have a suite of automation workflow tools, but I don't know exactly what they do. I've read the documentation. I have in my head an idea of what they're meant to do, but I haven't seen it function. So if there's staffing support roles that do that, I would hire one for my practice. That might be a good way to hedge some of the risks we're talking about, is you ensure there's a SME on your staff and everybody wins. So yeah, that stuff is definitely happening, Rob. And then firms will continue to pitch AI functionality, and my sense is the FOMO wave will crest and the AI function will be tailored more to what clients actually want, as opposed to just in bright light saying we have the thing. They're going to be like, hey, our experience has shown this is surgically where it fits. These are the outcomes that it affects. This is, the billing rate we give you for the AI supported work, et cetera. So there's some flexibility there, but yeah, it's a more closely bespoke tailored fit for AI function is definitely coming to practice.
Great. And that article that we were talking about is from a company called 3 Points, the law firm called 3 Points, which is supposed to be AI native, which,
yeah, I'm looking
3
at the
Points
article
is what they're
now.
called. And that's this AI native question I think is really interesting. So if you just imagine that we're going to be shifting more towards that as a bucket of work, is more AI native organizations, how do you think that changes the skill sets required in the legal profession? Is there anything new, or is there a shift in skills?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely need an increasing comfort level with digitization. But again, to make what's old new again and vice versa, that's no different than taking a pen and paper lawyer and sticking them in front of Microsoft Word. Um, so yeah, there is a learning curve there. This firm, though, the difference is, how they've designed it from the start. So their billing models, their tech stack, none of that needs to be tweaked to fit the new model. It's built around it. So that is, if they succeed, that is why that it'll happen. So that's where I think the dividing line is. Like, look, there are firms that will successfully layer in bits and bobs of AI, but this new generation, this next wave of native firms, their success will be built on that nativity, if you will. So look, their three prongs are their stack, and if they are managing their risk correctly, that stack will be lean. So it's up to the individual firm to pick the suite of AI tools that will do what needs done and nothing more. Because in my opinion, additional tooling is additional risk, and certainly if it's redundant tooling. Then they talk about billing and client delivery based mostly in those tools capabilities. And that is where I don't know enough to answer, because yeah, the tools can pull out high level provisions. They can keep workflow on task. It can set calendaring dates, which is a hugely important thing for a litigator. But at some point, that person, that associate, will have to plug in and make beneficial use of the inputs. And that's where, the individual firm has to keep their trust and responsibility. The third part of their prong was social responsibility, pro bono. And most firms do that. We don't, I mean, at least in Maryland where I'm licensed, we're not required to do pro bono work, but we are required to report. And even if that number is zero. So there's an interest in the states at every level, even if it's just reporting zero, in shifting lawyers towards a pro bono mindset. So I support that. It's not integral really to the commercial success of the firm, but it is something that lawyers do that enriches their practice and might have brand reputational effect and so on. But that's the third prong. So the first two are tech heavy. The third one is, hey, we still do good while we're being tech forward, and like, hey, who doesn't support that, right? Do good.
Right. That's all about reputation. That's interesting.
Right.
I see we're kind of coming close to time here. If we can look further out, let's imagine 5 years and beyond, 2030 and beyond. You have any big, bold predictions of what happens in the legal industry? Some big, crazy, unexpected legal scenarios you can imagine?
Well, I would almost hit you with the inverse, which is there's plenty of inertia because there's lots of money in the current system. And, on one hand, there's an incentive to be cutting edge and reduce costs. And on the other hand, I'm sure if somebody wanted to pay me $2,000 for my hour, I would be, interested in reducing my time spent, but like not that interested. I mean, obviously not in a way that's ethically impermissible. You get my point. It's that there's inertia there. The current system works for the people entrenched in it. So like everything, there's hesitancy. But if the market demands that efficiency, the ones who survive will deliver it. So that's not an answer to your question. Your question is there something out of left field here that may come? I mean, sure. Assuming that maturation and automation come to like with the assistance of, I don't know, some deeply functional quantum computer that's accessible to people. Could you leave lower level, high volume practice mostly to a machine, but for like appellate review? Maybe. Would you want your parking ticket argued by a laptop on a desk that you open up that interacts with the judge? I don't know. You tell me. Is that possible? Yeah. You could load up a database with enough instructions to and pivot points and inflection points and historicals to do that. And it is not not out of left field, but I think one area that will grow a lot is prediction. Like jury consultants are, as a thing as old as time. So to the extent there is AI insight unlockable through regressing historicals and predicting forward about judicial temperament and jurisdiction, I think that'll be something people will buy, because everybody always wants to have more control over the future. And if there's a lane there, I would back that, because we do it now and we do it with people. Can agentic AI do it better? Maybe, probably in some ways. So that's one that's going to take off in my estimation. Other than that, I mean, let's wait for the innovators. I don't know how far we'll go on the trust and responsibility vice automation, timeline, but there's no way to avoid ultimate responsibility. So that's a cap. How far we get to the line there on what people will outsource, we'll see. But my guess is it'll be a lot. It might be more than we're contemplating now. Probably will be. But the tech will tell.
Any recommendations that you have for executives working with lawyers? What kind of recommendations would you have thinking about implementing AI, thinking about working with legal profession using AI? How should they think about it?
They should think about it now as experiment broadly, adopt, not cautiously, not as needed, but like adopt surgically. So by all means, get in the sandbox, spin up some virtual machines and play with it, see what it does. And if the use case is right for you, put money behind it. But I have yet to see a huge return on just getting in on it because of FOMO. Because lots of products have AI things layered in now that their customers haven't asked for, that don't really do anything, that don't modify the core product other than to add risk and complexity. So I would say try not to do that. But as far as management interaction with lawyerdom through AI, I think it would be a mistake to. So I've seen contracts that say, or management pronouncements that say, we'll invest in this AI tool, but it must drive review time down to X. Or I've seen payment terms that say, we use AI to do our review, therefore we're not going to pay for more than 1 hour of legal time. I hear you, but that's not a map for reality. Lawyers have to brain stuff. So sometimes it takes me half a day to noodle on an idea. And once I come up with a solution, I'm like, that was clear, but it took 4 hours of people synthesis. So AI may help with that, but to put the pressurizing back end on it, we will only pay for X. If you tell a lawyer you're only going to pay for an hour of their time, you're only going to get an hour, and whether the product is fully baked or not, you're going to get what comes out after an hour. And that's not in anybody's best interest. So efficiencies are there, but be careful how much pressure you put on it, because you're risking your product. So that's the admonition I would get. I would say, other than look, support lawyers. I use it. It helps me synthesize my thoughts. It helps me start somewhere. But it's the I was going to say be all, not the end all, but I'm not sure that makes sense. It's the start, but it's not the finish. So that's where we are now on the tech.
That's great. That's great. All right. Last question.
Okay.
What most excites you about AI or the future of the legal profession?
I think I hinted at this before. What's most exciting to me is the idea that AI can help lawyers synthesize things. Research is hard. It happens across jurisdictions. It happens within federal circuits that comprise multiple states. It happens in industries that are regulated in verticals. So, to the extent that information relevant to whatever your legal question is can be synthesized easily and correctly by AI, I mean, that is a gift from God as far as lawyers are concerned, because it's so hard to find that information without a digital assist nowadays. So, to the extent that becomes closer and closer to perfect, I think you'll see almost 100% adoption of that capability. So that's the next thing that I will try to use it for is, hey, grab me everything on this topic horizontally across jurisdiction, because that's a big part of real in the courtroom practice, and where you could get a quick return on your investment. So that's a big one.
That's great. I imagine for a lot of people that'll end up watching this, it's a huge disappointment that you didn't say we're going to be able to replace all those $2,000 an hour lawyers.
No,
But I think
not
you made
yet,
a
man.
great case. You made a great case that, you know, we really do need to do this right. And there still is a lot of human judgment and human collaboration required. But we're going to, just like in every other industry, AI is really going to empower the field in some exciting new ways. So
Absolutely,
awesome,
100%.
Matt. Yeah, thank you so much for your time. It was a really fun
Thank you.
conversation.
Yeah, appreciate it. Love spending time with you as always, Gordon. Thank you for the chance. I hope this was helpful to anyone who hears it and sees it. And otherwise, the faults are mine, the benefits are Rob's, and that's it. Thanks again. Really appreciate it.
And the liability is all Gordon's.
Fair enough. I love it. Let's end there. Thanks, guys. Take care, y'all.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Matt. What a wonderfully informative conversation on the state of AI in the legal profession and its potential future. The impact of AI on legal work is no longer hypothetical. It's a new frontier of lawyering. This evolution is not about displacing lawyers, but rather redefining their role, making them more efficient and more effective. Lawyers who embrace both legal acumen and tech savviness will thrive in roles focused on strategy, ethics, and oversight. The skill set will shift from navigating statutes to navigating systems. And beyond efficiency, AI has the potential to expand access to justice, streamline services for underserved communities, and promote fairness through transparency. AI is not replacing the legal profession, it's empowering and reshaping it. Thank you, everyone.